Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HealthyX Sundays podcast, where we bring you the most important and actionable information in the nutrition and fitness space. I'm your host, Kunal Jain, also known as Veg Diet Coach, and joining me today as co host is Dave from Mind Muscle Project. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Yogesh Dixit, a transformational figure in the realm of health and fitness. Formerly challenged by weight gain during his IT career, Yogesh embarked on a remarkable journey that reshaped his life. Inspired by a pivotal book and driven by a passion for optimal health, he shed 15 kgs within months and reversed his metabolic health problems. His quest for knowledge led him through the pitfalls of mainstream nutrition advice to discovering the efficacy of low carb and ketogenic diets in managing type 2 diabetes. Today, as the founder of Eat Right Monk, Yogesh runs lifestyle reset programs and empowers hundreds with personalized lifestyle coaching, promoting metabolic health as the cornerstone of well being. We are very excited to have you with us on Healthy X Sundays, Yogesh. So let's begin with your journey.
Hey, thanks, Kunal, for the warm welcome. And I would like to thank you and Dave for the invite here, right? I mean, my privilege. So, and I know you're in a different time zone, Kunal. So, thanks for being available for this particular session as such. So,
Very
let's
kind
get
of
started.
you. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
please begin with your journey. What motivated you to become a health and fitness enthusiast after gaining weight in your early 30s? Yeah, please begin with your journey.
Absolutely, would like to share that, right? So, before even I speak about me being a a lifestyle coach. Let's talk about what essentially transpired me getting into this kind of an persona, right? I mean, around let's say almost 19-20 years back. So, back in 2004, I started getting a realization. So, almost 20 years back, right? I mean, I started getting a
Yeah,
realization that I've put on a bit of weight, right? And why I'm saying bit of weight is if you look at it from an ideal body weight standpoint, I was not carrying. I mean, I was not like really very overweight or heavy as such. So for my height, if let's say my ideal body weight is probably around 70 odd kgs, 68, 70, I was barely like 76, 77 kgs back then. But
okay,
up until now, so I was talking about me being in my early 30s, right? So I was up until then I was like really very lean and underweight kind of a person. And contrary to that, even those 6 or 7 kgs, maybe 7 odd kgs additional weight gain that I had was proving to be a lot for me. I mean, when I look at myself in the mirror, right? I mean, people never
right,
spoke about that. No one probably realized or maybe thought about me being overweight, but I was, and that was, I mean, something that I was not liking at all. So
right,
that was the trigger, right? I mean, in terms of me getting at least involved with something to do with, let's say, reducing weight. And that's where the few more things that got started. I mean, we'll anyways talk about what was that. I would say the key trigger, right? I mean, in terms of I coming across a book, and that's how I basically got started with this particular journey. But
right.
I will hold on to that, right? I mean, in the session today, we'll anyways talk about that. So yeah, that was the phase of life when I basically started looking at myself, my weight, my overall health, and things like that. Almost 19 odd years back. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Yogesh. So you mentioned that there was some book which was very pivotal in your transformation, a book by Dr. Abe Bang. Would you like to talk about that and how it motivated you or educated you to start this
Absolutely.
journey?
Absolutely right. So this was 2005 Feb, right? And then Jan Feb time frame when I was in the US, I was in California. I was obviously I worked with IT for almost 25, 26 years before I took a plunge
Right,
and got into this. But so this was when I was in California, Southern California. I couldn't had my family joining me back then, right? So I was like alone over there. And contrary to what happens when people probably get that kind of an freedom and time, I started becoming, I mean, I became a lot, let's say I started introspecting about what's happening around me. I was
right,
definitely going through another key, I would say, element at that point in time, which was I became extremely hyper acidic, right? So Prior to
Okay.
2004, between let's say 2000 and 2004, I came across quite a few bouts about hyperacidity, right? And then again, those times also I happened to be unfortunately alone in the US back in 2001, 2002. And obviously most of us, right, I mean, at that stage of life, and the kind of roles that you're playing, kind of let's say exposure that you get, number of different things happen in your life. So I basically started eating out a lot, right? I mean, which I have not done up until then, right? I mean, so most of till my let's say 30s, I've barely had food outside, and then that was a major change. I started liking having that food, and there was obviously no choice when a lot of travel and a lot of working, right? I mean, which is involved. I've always been kind of an workaholic per se. I mean, for last maybe whatever years that I've been working in industry or maybe as a professional over here. But so
Okay.
that also took a toll in terms of let's say switching from a very healthy kind of an eating habits to kind of unhealthy eating habits, right? So yeah, I mean,
Right.
I would like to reflect, right? I mean, this session might overspill, I'm not too sure, but I would like to reflect because this resonates a lot with people that I speak with. I don't call the individuals that I work with that's clients, but trainees, right? So trainees or any other one person that I speak about, it resonates
Right.
really well. So what started happening was, I'll give you an example, right? I mean, not probably a situation I would like to narrate. So back in 2002, when I was on a project in the US, again it was a very brief kind of a project. I traveled alone over there, and 3 months, right? I mean, in the
Yeah.
east coast of US. And then I was having the kind of food that I was having. I was like really kind of vegetarian back then, and I was having soup and salad kind of a diet. And
Okay.
that basically took a toll, having that kind of even raw solid salads, right? I mean, many times. And that took a toll in terms of that acidity being aggravated to any extent. Like, I mean, I constantly used to have a lot of burns, right? I mean, heart burns and things like that. I mean, acid reflux, GERD, those kinds of things. And
Okay.
that essentially made me think whether I'm having any cardiovascular symptoms, any issues, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing. Twice I was like actually went to ER, and then second time when emergency rooms, right? I mean, that's a critical kind of a critical care that happens in the US. So
Okay.
second time when I went to the same hospital, same doctors, they actually told me, Yogesh, I mean, there's absolutely nothing that requires you to be coming over here. I mean, there's no cardiovascular issue involved. I mean, you probably would need to be when going to a, let's say, psychiatrist, right? I mean, because there's something else that you need to be taking care of. There's nothing to do with cardiovascular issues as such. But then I
Right.
realized, because I was having this constant let's say heartburns and acid reflux and things like that, I was palpitations and number of different kinds of situations that I was going through. And that was basically making me feel that there's something weird that is happening with me. I might I mean, getting into a cardiovascular event or something like that, right? I mean, so to that extent, I was like really unwell, I would say. And I have compromised my health with the acidity and things like that. But over the course of, let's say, next 1.5 years, I and my wife, I mean, we sat down, we looked at what happened in last couple of years. We realized that there's a lot of eating out happening, and adapted, let's say, some wrong eating habits. So we corrected that, and my journey started from there, but not in a very focused way. So I think somewhere around 2003, 2002, 2003, I made some changes in terms of my dietary habits, and that actually yielded a lot of benefits in terms of me coming out of that acidic kind of a situation, right? So that was an amazing thing. But then when I mean, fast forward into 2005 of Jan, when I started looking back at that event, when I was not getting any acidity kind of an I mean, I was not coming across any kind of situation. So I then started looking at what else can be done, how I can become, let's say, a lot more healthy, how I can become a lot more fitter, and how I can reduce the weight that I've accumulated, probably that's 7-8 kgs, right? So that's where.
Right.
And at the same time, when I started doing some bits, I came across this particular book that's in Marathi. I'm basically Marathi speaking person, right? So the book name is
Right.
Maza Sakshatkari Hriday Rog, and it is by an amazing person, right? I mean, Dr. Abhay Bang. Many of the basically people in the audience might be knowing that, but if they're not, I think that's a great book to have. So he, being a doctor, he's narrating his it's like an, let's say, retrospection. So being a doctor at the, let's say, mid 40s, he came across a
Okay.
cardiac event, and he essentially, it's a reflection after, let's say, he went through surgeries, procedures, and things like that. It's a reflection about why he attracted that kind of an event, because he all those while was like considering himself as like following a lot of health and fitness and those kinds of things, right? I mean, eating clean and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's where basically that particular experience that he's shared, why he attracted that, right? I mean, a lot of introspection, retrospection that is there in that particular book. I think that had a very deep impact on me. I started looking at life, at food, at nutrition, at fitness a lot differently. I became a lot more serious about that. I mean, up until then I was doing it probably as a amateur, or maybe just an enthusiastic person. But there on, I started
Right.
focusing on, say, all these aspects in a more, let's say, structured way, in a more serious manner. I hope, I mean, this was probably a little longish, this thing bit, but otherwise that's what I think, the those are the points which basically triggered in terms of my transformation, right? I mean, at least from an how to look at food and nutrition standpoint.
Okay. So great. So this book, is it available, if you have any idea, available in other languages other than Marathi?
I
Uh,
guess not, because I was
okay.
hoping that it is available in English, but I guess not.
Okay. No
If I
problem.
mean, I'll double check on that. I have not checked recently, but I'll probably post it over here if I get anything that is available in English.
Yeah, it sounds like a valuable resource because it talks about a
Absolutely.
doctor retrospecting about their life choices and how to
Yep.
then
Yep.
improve that. So I think you mentioned that eating out when you were traveling and in a like heavy pressure work and eating outside, that caused a lot of acid reflux issues for you, and then you
Yep.
stopped cutting down on that part, and then you came across this book, and then you started uh, doing some changes. What about the mainstream nutrition advice, which everyone gets that, okay, do this, do that, and you'll be healthy? What is your experience with the mainstream nutrition advice, which you must have read during that time, and how did that impact your health?
Great. Awesome. No, I mean, that I think most of the people who are following social media and influencers and whatnot, I think they need to be like really aware of what they're consuming, what kind of information that they're consuming, and whether it is really a valid, scientifically based kind of an information, because many a times it is not. So I'll basically narrate what happened. So I started on that journey. I reduced, maybe I lost 15 odd kgs, doing ton of cardio, a bit of weights, a lot of walking, right? I mean, over a period of maybe 8 to 10 months. And that was an amazing trans. In fact, it was, I became a lot underweight, I would say. I mean, to the extent that I always wanted to see me as, let's say, in frame of athlete, right? I mean, a long distance runner, not athlete. I mean, to be very specific, a long distance runner, and I
Okay.
could actually get into that particular frame, right? I mean, so I was like really liking that transformation. People are basically giving mixed comments in terms of the change, this thing. I mean, outlook as such. But after coming back to India, I started following a lot of these advices which are being given by mainstream experts, I would say. I mean, not just nutritionists, in fact, even in the from the medical fraternity, right? Because my dad was diabetic, and many other diabetics, and still they are being given advice like, जो हिंदी में बोलते हैं ना, थोड़ा थोड़ा खाओ लेकिन दिन में 5 6 7 बार खाओ करके. So
Huh.
that's what I've started doing. While I was earlier, I was doing most part of my like life, I was doing maybe 2 3 meals a day. I started doing multiple meals a day, and I started eating small meals, right? I mean, to the extent, so the first meal used to be like, I was an early riser, right? And I used to basically hit the office back then, like around maybe 8 ish or something, 8 8 8:15 a.m. in the morning. I used to have the first instance of meal used to be like, let's say, some cereals, like maybe cornflakes, milk, and some dates into that. Because all of these nutritionists, right? I mean, or experts, they talk very highly about dates, khajur, right? I mean, so
Yes.
and it, I mean, does it have any nutrition? Yes, I mean, it probably has, like, let's say, iron, but what else it has? I mean, it has ton and ton of, let's say, fructose. And do I need that fructose? Absolutely not. I was doing
Yes.
a lot of these really very bad kind of, and I mean, not me, I would say, most of the people who basically get into that kind of a zone. And I'm sure that Kunal, you and even Dave, right? I mean, they must have gone through some of these situations, right? I mean, if not
Definitely.
with yourself, probably someone around you, maybe your parents or whatever others. So I started doing a lot of these things, like let's say first meal over there, then after hitting the office, maybe a breakfast sometimes 9 o'clock, 9:30, whatever. 12,
Right.
12:31, some lunch, right? And then again 3 o'clock, probably what I mean, some nuts, some those kinds of, maybe a fruit, that kind of a thing. Then 5 o'clock, 5:36, again some food, right? I mean, outside, maybe a corn, whatever, I mean, whatever that is available, right? And then let's say around 9, 9:30, 10, a dinner. And which is all of these like absolutely wrong choices of life. I mean, not just food, the timing of food, the composition of food, number of different things matter over here. All of that was like very incorrectly adapted. And all this while I was like really swearing on these people, experts who have been giving all those information, not just. And at that time, I was never on Facebook. I'm still like not a social media savvy kind of a person, I would say. But I was getting a lot of these information, consuming number of books, right? So, and that is basically a lot detrimental, because the way these people talk about it, the kind of conviction they talk about it, they write about it, they author books, multiple books, right? I mean, you don't, I mean, there's no chance that you basically start doubting that, right? I mean, their intent, what they're
Right.
doing, what they're doing is right or wrong, those kinds of things, right? So I almost blindly, like all of us, have started following that kind of an wrong advice, I mean, which I got to know it later. But while I was doing, let's say, I continued my physical activities, right? I mean, all these while, right? I mean, all these years I've
Right.
been doing what is required to be done, or probably more. But then what happened is, because of wrong food choices, wrong timings, and obviously some stress that you gather, right? I mean, the phases of life that you go through, be it work, be it travel, be it number of other things, I essentially became entry level diabetic, right? I mean, I was put on metformin, and that was kind of a shocker. And then possibly we can talk about a few other things later. But that was basically the kind of issue that I came across by following absolute wrong set of advice, and not validating that against, let's say, scientific basis. And I was just, I mean, like most of the others, I think I blindly followed that. And that is basically made me diabetic, which was kind of a shocker. And I could not process that information. I mean, as compared to most of my colleagues, friends, relatives, I was doing a lot better
Right.
in terms of, let's say, I was not eating a lot of fried food, I was not eating a lot, let's say, processed foods and things like that. But still I became diabetic, right? I mean, that was kind of a shocker. So I'll take a pause. I think, yeah, I hope that explains what exactly was happening back then.
Right. So this is interesting. You had already started improving your health even before you started reading these books, which are like very mainstream these days. Everyone knows
Yep.
about these authors, everyone
Yep.
reads them and even worships them. But still, despite all that information, people don't get metabolically healthy. They become pre-diabetic or diabetic. And in your case, I feel that you kind of see that following this advice led you to pre-diabetes, and because you've already taken care of your health in other ways as well. So
Yep.
this is quite a revelation for everyone that there are so many fitness influencers and people who just put out stuff. Maybe they do it for fame, they do it for money, but the advice which people are consuming, it's not really helping them. It's actually leading to poor metabolic health and developing all metabolic diseases. So this is
Yep.
something I think you have highlighted very well, that following people and blindly following anyone is can be a grave mistake, and you can pay with your health, and you'll realize
Yep.
it very later on, once
Right.
you're already diagnosed with some problem. So that's
Yep.
very interesting. And then I want to then understand that once you realize that this is like a red flag, that following these people is a red flag, then what did you actually do differently to start improving your health, get over your type 2 diabetes? What was the protocol you followed after that?
That's interesting, funny, sad, right? I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
emotions probably together. But
exactly.
let me go one by one, right? I mean, so that was a journey. While I was thankfully doing a lot of things, like not eating fry, I mean, not eating out a lot, not eating a lot of processed foods, exercising, right? I mean, while being, I mean, going, while always being, I mean, having, let's say, going through a traveling kind of a lifestyle. I still manage to basically adhere to a certain morning routine, even from any corner of the world, right? I mean, I used to basically work out every single morning within the confines of an hotel room or whatever, wherever I'm staying, right? So that actually helped in terms of, let's say, I mean, keeping the blood glucose levels, let's say, slightly above maybe normal ranges, right? I mean, so not very highly diabetic, I would say, but I was never getting that particular feel that I was able to reduce that, right? I mean, to any extent as such, and while being on very entry level, let's say, metformin as such. So what I've started doing is, I like everyone else probably, or many other inquisitive kind of people who do, I mean, karela ka juice, neem ka juice, whatever, I mean,
Right.
methi dana, right? I mean, you name it, and I did that. I think many people must have done that, right? I mean, in this particular space. So I was doing a lot of these random kind of things, which basically tell you that having this very small bit of intervention can make you healthy, can, I mean, help you in terms of, let's say, reducing your blood, or maybe getting the blood glucose levels within the range, and blah blah
Right.
blah. But I mean, think about it. If you keep your main food, I mean, main composition, right, of the food same, and you essentially provide inputs of few grams of some, maybe, I mean, either medicines or whatever, I mean, supplements, or these kinds of foods, maybe it karela or neem or whatever, right? I mean, it is not going to help at all. I mean, we, all of us, should have that particular understanding. Unfortunately, when we are going through a lot of these things, we do not give a proper attention about what we are doing, right? I mean, so we most of the times do extremely bad in terms of taking correct decisions. And then the other thing is, there is no, I mean, at that time, I'm talking about maybe a decade back, right? I mean, at that time, there was no information that is available in terms of what is required to be done, or what can be done to basically, or I was not accessible, right? I mean, to that information, I would say, let me correct that. So I was just following what was available, right? I mean, in terms of those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, the other advice that has been given is, yeah, I mean, I'll quote, right? I mean, I don't want to
Right.
malign anyone over here, but I don't want to put anyone into that kind of an space or zone. But even the medical experts, everyone, right? I mean,
Right.
including the diabetologists, they'll tell you that, okay, ha, ghar ka khana khao, and then control these things. I mean, oily mat khao, and then what else? I mean, yeah, walk a bit. So I used to be always surprised कि मैं oily नहीं खा रहा हूँ. You're telling me to walk. I'm basically running a lot. I'm doing
Right.
many other things, right? I mean, in life, what exactly is required more? And they were like always used to be speechless. People, like, I mean, experts used to tell me, एक ही गोली खा रहा है तो, I mean, what's the big deal? I mean, why you're like so worried about that? And I've seen my dad's journey, which was not really bad, because he lived with diabetic for almost 40 odd years. He passed away at the age of 83. But I could see the progression, right? I mean, wo ek goli kha ke it doesn't stop over there. It always progresses, right? So
Right.
that was what my contention was, and I was never happy with the kind of discussion that we used to have, even with my medical providers, right? So that's where I
Right.
started basically going through, I mean, pillar to post in terms of getting information, consuming that, experimenting with that. Like, I mean, go on a juice diet, go on this kind of a thing. There is a famous doctor in Maharashtra, right? I mean, he runs kind of a movement, and I was part of that movement. Like, I mean, it's very simple, and if it done in a correct way, that also can help, right? But that is, I'm not too sure whether that's happening in a correct way, because I was not benefited, because that particular approach talks about eating only twice a day, but you can eat whatever that you want. And that
Right.
itself is a very wrong kind of an advice, because if you're not changing your input, your output is not going to change, right? I mean, if you're still consuming a lot of carbohydrates, you're bound to be becoming sick, remaining sick, and there are like a lot of other repercussions by having those kinds of carbohydrates, right? So we'll anyways come to the carbohydrate and other parts probably a little later. But I was doing every single bit to basically get me out of that particular zone, and I was like not successful. And then we can talk about, maybe in a few minutes, maybe a minute, about what happened is K11 happened to me. I mean, K11 is an institute where I first got to formally trained on nutrition and exercise science, and that was a game changer. That's where I basically, and this was way back in 2016, 17, 18, around 2017, I would say. And that was a
Okay.
game changer, because the way I think a lot of scientific evidences have been provided over there. the doctors who are in the low carb space across the globe, I was introduced to them through this particular course. I was like really happy when I was doing my full blown corporate. I was like neck deep into my corporate stint and playing different levels. I mean, I would say a lot. I would say uh, extreme kind of roles, right? I mean, at times in terms, demanding kind of roles in terms of your time, in terms of your whatever. I mean, commitment and things like that. So I was attending the school,
Right.
this particular nutrition school, on weekends, typically Sundays, and I was like actually looking forward to every Sunday to basically acquire new set of knowledge. And that was
Right.
really the next game changer moment. I mean, after the book that I read in 2005, this was in 2017. I was like really what I mean that there are no words, right? I mean, in terms of the kind of change that happened to me, and I'm basically, I call myself as a mediator, right? I mean, whatever. So through me, I mean, number of other people, I could basically kind of transform their lives, right? So that was an amazing intervention, or maybe a game changing moment that I came across. Yeah, I'll take a
Right.
pause, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think K11 school of exercise nutrition. So this is like a starting point where you started getting some evidence-based uh, knowledge about
Absolutely.
nutrition and fitness, and
Absolutely.
this probably was this your trigger to actually, what was then the trigger to move from your IT profession into an coaching? Basically, you're the founder of Eat Right Monk. So was this the trigger to do it,
Absolutely,
to get
yeah.
into coaching?
So yes, yes. Yeah. So I was about to be coming to that. Thanks for that question, Kunal. So
Yeah.
here is what happened, right? I mean, so I've still continued. I mean, in my corporate stint for another couple of years while doing after doing my attending the school, right? And then on nutrition, exercise, science. So I started experimenting again. I would also like to quote an example, right? I mean, there is a huge difference when you learn, experiment, and then try certain things on yourself, and then so it is still kind of a longish journey. For me at least, it was definitely a kind of longish journey, because you yourself probably are not very well convinced that even after learning, hearing, right? I mean, a lot of those studying, researching, a lot of those things, you still need to experiment, right? I mean, in terms of,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, if you reduce certain carbohydrates, if you include some other fatty protein foods, what happens to your blood glucose levels, what happens to you? And there are so many myths which are, I mean, around us key. I mean, there is so much of fat phobia, there is so much of protein phobia, right? I mean, so people, all of us, our brains, our minds are basically corrupted with these wrong advices. So while doing those experiments for the first time, it was still kind of an, in a very gradual manner. It was not a switch from, let's say, a high carb kind of a lifestyle to maybe immediately jumping on to low carb, right? So I basically went through my journey, but I started getting slowly started getting positive results, and that is basically started building that conviction that yes, I'm on the right track. And
Right.
a lot of things were happening, right? I mean, I was, let's say, getting towards my, let's say, late 40s and things like that back then, and I was looking at something which is more meaningful in my life. I was looking at something which I am passionate about, and
Right.
I basically, the universe was sending those signals. I mean, I don't want to make it sound cliched, but that was actually happening, because I was
Right.
looking at something which is meaningful, and I was constantly getting this message. Even becoming, I mean, sorry, even before becoming a full blown lifestyle coach, I basically was giving as a hobby, right? I mean, everyone does that. So as a hobby, I was helping my colleagues, friends, relatives, because they always used to ask, yeah, I mean, you have done this course, let me take some tips from you, right? And I used to basically very
Correct.
happily what I mean create diet plans, or whatever I used to call diet plan back then. So I don't call it as a
Right.
diet plan. It is definitely a lifestyle change. I work a lot about lifestyle, not just diet as such. I mean, diet is definitely one key part. But anyways, coming back, so I did that, right? But I was not seeing success, because I mean, it was happening in a very casual manner, right? I mean, there was
Right.
no follow-ups, there was no governance, there was nothing that I was monitoring, right? I mean, what they're doing. So that diet
Right.
plan was like just a piece of paper which is being like sent through an email from me to that person, and we were like casually chatting about how I'm getting some benefits, blah blah blah. But otherwise, there was nothing that I did not get, let's say, even a single kind of a positive, I would say, indication, signal that someone has got benefited because what I was doing. But I, in my mind, was absolutely clear that I need to be doing this as a full-fledged activity, because the
Right.
way I basically carried certain things in my corporate life, I was a taskmaster. I'm not here
Right.
to brag about it. I want to basically give a lot of clarity in terms of how certain things happen, because so I was doing certain things or a lot of things in a very disciplined, very consistent manner. I thought, why not to get into that? And I was already, let's say, leading large teams. I managed
Right.
really large global teams. So I was knowing how to basically navigate through some of those situations, working with people and their psyche and things like that. So that was giving me a lot of, I would say, positives about me getting into this space. And finally it happened. So I basically came out of my, let's say, corporate stint, in 2019, exactly 5 years back, June 2019. And I started, it took probably a couple of months in terms of deciding this, or there is one more, let's say, hobby that I've been pursuing for even before or around the same time frame as, let's say, my nutrition thing happened. So I
Okay.
was contemplating between the two, but then I looked at the kind of, let's say, benefits that I can provide to the society, right? I mean, in picking this particular
Exactly.
profession as such. And that's how I opted for, this lifestyle coach kind of a profession. Yeah. So that's how it happened, Kunal. Thanks for asking.
Which amazing story, Yogesh.
Yeah.
I mean, the best part I found about it is that after you got the right knowledge, you applied that knowledge on yourself. You
Yeah.
validated that it works. It is,
Absolutely.
it works and it gets results, and then you started helping people out. Um,
100%.
and you had that conviction that this is going to help them, but then you thought that okay, this has to be, in order for it to work,
Yep.
people to actually get the benefit, it has to be done in a more structured way. And then you have
Yep.
this great corporate experience of leading big accounts and big teams. And then you thought that why not use those skills and merge
Yep.
your knowledge and that experience, and then do it in a professional way to do
Yep.
it. And then you founded Eat Right Monk, which is a very
Absolutely.
interesting name.
Yeah.
And I would like to
Right.
ask you about how did you come to this name,
Yeah.
and what's the kind of thinking behind it? Yeah.
True, true. Right, right. So, this is something which is really very close to my heart, right? And this is in no way this is a big brand or something, but you obviously have that kind of an thing, right? Between what you do and as your profession. So, uh, this name, it probably must have taken for me almost a year to come up with. I was contemplating between a few other things, but see, I already have, let's say, alluded to a couple of things about discipline, about consistency, about commitment, right? Those kinds of things. So I could not, and I wanted that to be a part of my brand, right? When I'm setting this brand, I'll talk about how I conduct, let's say, my sessions, typically the first session with anyone. So
Yes.
I essentially wanted to, and I'm not, let's say, comparing myself with anyone, right? That's not the intent. But when I wanted to be getting into a space which is kind of crowded, or which is already being there are people who have been like hardcore nutritionists. There are people who are like really thick into these kinds of knowledge, years of experience, maybe bachelors and masters and whatever, and phds in nutrition, and know what not. So I wanted to create a niche, right? And then that is absolutely required. Some of the things that and this is very interesting, I make it a point to talk about it with my prospects typically, and possibly some of the trainees also. But what happens is, what happened is, like, I was getting an understanding in my corporate life what is not required to be done when I'm getting into, let's say, my own profession. So one thing that I was getting to understand, that there has to be a lot of discipline, commitment, those kinds of things, because a lot of people in this particular space, they're into bulk business, right? What is bulk business is like just handing out the diet plans, and
Right.
it's like, you get the templates, right? In India, those kinds of templates, not templates, sorry, pamphlets at home, that एक महीने में 4 kgs कम कर दो and all. I used to
Right.
like really, I mean, no offense to anyone, right? I mean, I really don't want to sound like that, but it is really very weird that एक महीने में 4 kgs कम कर दो. तो I mean, yeah, that's easy, that's possible. I'm not making fun of that. I think the issue is there is a huge yo-yo that people go through, right? I mean, that एक महीने में 4 kgs कम होता है for maybe a wedding, for maybe a vacation, for maybe something else, but again एक महीने में वापस आता है. And that is something that I've been seeing with people around me. People, I'm on a diet, right? I mean, that kind of that sentence always puts me off. I'm on a diet. So that means you're
Correct.
going to be giving that up and then going back to your original habits, and you're going to get back, accumulate that weight back, right? I mean, so that was something that was like really not funny, but that was something that I was not able to cope up with, right? I mean, so I wanted to create a niche. I wanted to make sure that this particular brand is going to be revolving around a lot of commitment and a mindset, right? I mean, so very apt title. Thanks for that, Kunal. Health is a mindset, right? So I wanted
Right.
to promote that particular aspect about how to create that health first mindset, because there otherwise there is absolutely no, I mean, no choice first, and then I think we are not going to be getting benefited for long. I mean, for our lifespan as such. So that's where the
Right.
monk came in, because I wanted to convey that aspect, of very strong aspect, that if you want to be getting into this particular program, this is what I mean, you would be going through, and not as a let's say, as a penalty or a fine. I mean, this is something that is required to make sure that you are embracing this as a lifestyle, and you are basically walking the path, so that you can become and remain healthy for your lifespan, and you don't, hopefully you don't need to come back to me for the same things again and again and again. So the kind of shop that I've set up is for not for the repeat business. I mean, that, so a lot of different, I would say, notions were coming through, and I wanted to make sure that people do get an understanding, my trainees do get an understanding about what they are signing up for, and how they can get benefited for their, let's say, lifespan. And this is not, let's say, a program that they're doing for X months, but this is something that they're signing up for a longer term as such. So that's where the monk happened. And eat right was, I think, there in my mind for a good amount of time. Only thing is, I was not able to accentuate that. So this was like, I mean, one of the best things that happened, that I could basically what I mean, club eat right and monk together, and I'm absolutely happy about that. But because it conveys exactly what I do.
That's very interesting. Thanks, Yogesh.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask you about the eat right part.
Yeah.
So when you emphasize the eat right thing, does it mean that for optimal health, maybe if I was to give a weightage to health and exercise and rest and other things, do you think that for optimal health, 80% weightage is towards nutrition, which is basically eating right, and 20% maybe towards exercise and rest and everything? Do you think that kind of is the message?
Absolutely.
Or
Yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on, Kunal. So, see, that percentage may vary a bit here and there, but
yes, yes,
as you
definitely.
rightly put, yeah, I mean, nutrition is at the fulcrum, right? I mean, that's the pivot, right? I mean, that's where I think everything can be changed to a great extent. So, I started, and I was there, right? I mean, maybe a few years back, but when I start working with people who are like maybe CXOs, CXO minus one, execs, MDs, and things like that, and even many
Right.
other people, I mean, not necessarily just that startup people, but many other people, I started getting an understanding about an equal importance has to be given to sleep, and not equal, I mean, a little larger proportion, right? I mean, has to be given to, let's say, sleep and this thing as well. I mean, stress, maintaining and managing those. So maybe anywhere between 60 to 70% is definitely nutrition. So
Yes.
when I say nutrition, when I say eat right, it is about what is it that I'm eating and what is it I'm excluding, right? I mean, so the composition of food matters, the timing of the food matters, the pairing of the food matters, and the sequencing of the food. So many things do matter over here. See, on social media platform, probably I don't talk a lot, or I may not be visible a lot, but I what if you ask me what I like the most, I like to look at, I mean, basically one thing at a time, right? I mean, one person at a time or one case at a time. I become extremely happy after having that one conversation with a person, because it is very deep and intense. It's basically a heart to heart kind of a conversation when that person is hopefully, I mean, embracing the kind of discussion, I mean, changes that that those have been suggested, and the person is supposed to be implementing and getting better, right? So that's where I basically enjoy a lot. So coming back to so a lot of these things are part of my discussions with individuals and trainees. So eat right is basically a combination of let's say composition of food, timing of food, sequencing, pairing. A lot of those things are involved over there, and it is not just, let's say, so I would like to reflect on one more thing, right? I mean, there
Right.
is another, and again, not to offend anyone, right? But that, I mean, we get to hear, right, Kunal, eat in moderation, सब कुछ थोड़ा थोड़ा खाओ,
हाँ जी.
तो ये भी खाओ वो भी खाओ, सब कुछ चलता है, right? I mean, वो सब कुछ चलता है mindset doesn't work, to be very honest. And I mean, I'm not here to basically compliment that or recommend that, right? I mean, so obviously, being a low carber and being knowing what happens with excessive carbs, I should not be. I would say, if I'm promoting low carb, if I'm basically I'm a low carb coach, I should not be getting into that particular zone when I start talking about sab kuch thoda thoda, because I've seen, you have seen, maybe they have seen, many people probably must have seen that whenever you exceed your carb load, it is going to impact a lot, right? So
Yes.
it is a complete myth, and that's where I basically emphasize on that aspect of monk. It is a complete myth that okay, if there is a mango season, you are entitled to have a lot of mangoes. That's an absolute BS, right? I mean, if you're, who should decide how much of mango, or even a one mango you can eat or not? Because your blood glucose levels, your metabolic markers should decide that, right? I mean, I don't have anything against mango, but people go really all out when it comes to some of these some of these foods, and they don't know how their health is getting impacted, right? So I don't have anything against that, but when we receive that information about, let's say, sab kuch thoda thoda, and we blindly start implementing that without getting an understanding about how this is impacting my weight, and weight is just at the superficial level, but essentially my hormones and my metabolics, if they start getting understanding, if I would suggest they should get started on understanding, getting an understanding about all of these things. They will refrain from having like mindless eating, even mangoes or whatever other things. So that's where the eat right is like really, I mean, that's where I basically choose that particular term as such, eat right and monk. Yeah.
Right. So, what are some common misconceptions people have about uh, carbohydrates, or in general, like about food, which they think is healthy, but it may be actually creating problems for them? Any misconceptions people have? You want to share a couple of them?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. See, fruits itself, right? I mean, so let's start with that. Fruits. So and I was a big, let's say, believer in what, I mean, apple a day keeps doctor away, right? I mean, till even after joining, let's say, K11 and going through that course, I was still having, let me be very honest, I was still having, let's say, an apple, maybe a small apple or a half apple, because we look at a lot of these things are very innocent kind of foods, absolutely innocent, right? I mean, and those are being marketed, branded, positioned as, let's say, very healthy kind of foods, right? So look at what happens when the apple, right? I mean, I'm not too sure the audience over here what kind of geographies they're representing, but let me talk about, let's say, if I, being in India, and let's say the southern part of India, how many times I get an apple from Himachal or Kashmir? I've not seen that. Let's be honest. I mean, I've not seen any Himachal or Kashmir apples coming to Maharashtra or maybe southern parts of India. I'm not too sure about what happens in north, but yeah. So the kind of apples that I get are from California, New Zealand, whatever other countries, right? I mean, so you can imagine the transit time, you can imagine the supply chain, you can imagine the cold storage, the
Right.
months or maybe weeks of transit time, and we gorge on that food. We flaunt about eating healthy apple. That's nonsense. The other thing is about look at, I mean, because the shelf life has to be on the higher side, it is loaded with a lot of chemicals to make, I mean, to make it that kind of a product which is not perishable. So I mean, and again, we eat that as healthy, right? I mean, so and then comes the next worst thing, which is the fructose. And fructose is the worst part. And I mean, apple probably would be sitting somewhere in the middle, but there are like mangoes and jackfruits and number of other things, oranges and juices, right? I mean, those are like really fructose dense kind of products. and
Right.
we gorge on those. I mean, I used to be like, when I talk about you my stint in the US, or yeah, I mean, I used to have that, like, I mean, Minute Maid. So a lot of juices that we get to see, and we start consuming those, right? I mean, considering those to be really very healthy kind of options, food options, which they are not. Fructose is why fructose. I mean, I'm sure that, let's say Dave, if he wants to add, he will have ton of information to add over here. But that's the food which metabolizes in liver, and that is really detrimental, right? I mean, so I mean, it can be bracketed in the same level as, let's say, alcohol. So because
Right.
someone who's not having alcohol, that person can also, let's say, get into a fatty liver kind of an element, right? I mean, this is, and only because that person is having a lot of fructose, right? I mean, number of different types of, I mean, sources of fructose as such. So coming back, fruits is something that I do not recommend. Most of the times I won't recommend. Yeah, I mean, there are obviously some fruits that you can have, which are like really kind of innocent kind of fruits, maybe, if you will, right? I mean, maybe jamun, seasonal, like very seasonal, very local, but that does not mean that, like the mainstream nutritionists talk about, go local, go seasonal, and what other things, some nonsense, right? I mean, not every local thing, not every regional thing is healthy, I mean, for your own body condition, right? I mean, let me compare myself, right? I mean, maybe 20-year-old, 30-year-old me can easily, I mean, I was maybe having a lot of those fruits. I was not getting immediately impacted because of that. But when I started approaching my 30s, mid 30s, and I basically was having kind of a stressful and sedentary lifestyle, that had an impact, right? I mean, so there is obviously a context attached to everything. We cannot keep the context aside, right? Because many times I think the biggest mistake that happens is, I think most of these nutritionists and other people talk about, like, everything, I mean, one thing, one size fits all, right? I mean, that's the kind of, let's say, kind of an comment that is being, that's the kind of advice and tip that is being shared by everyone as such. But I think if I want to say that please eat mangoes, I would only recommend that to, let's say, only few sets of people, not everyone as such. So that's where I think we need to be getting an understanding about, where do I stand in terms of my metabolic health, and am I entitled to have this food which is having a lot of fructose in that. So that entitlement, I think, we basically give to ourselves, because someone is saying somewhere that mango is great, and this fruit is good, and you should be having, let's say, dates, and we basically start following again blindly a lot of those advices. So the other thing that I would suggest is essentially seed oils. We talk about that, I think, Dave has been talking about a lot for many years. But seed oils, I mean, rice bran, safola, right? I mean, corn, number of other things, those are like really very detrimental to our health. And many people have been having that, they again swear on that and consume that, and they don't even understand what is the impact of that. When it comes to grains, I always talk about not having. I haven't been having grains, right? I mean, for many years. I mean, in very minuscule quantity. I mean, not weekly, not even monthly. Sometime, right? I mean, maybe a bit of rice. I one thing that I strongly recommend is not to have wheat at all. Gehu, right? I mean, gehu is something that is to be completely abandoned. We should not be even consuming that. Rice or maybe some other grains are okay to have sometimes. I mean, again, based on your metabolic condition. But otherwise, I request to basically minimize to a large extent grains. I definitely request to not have flours, right? I mean, आटा जो रहता है काफी सारे grains का, so आटा खाने से, I mean, it is a lot better to have something like the whole grain. Maybe again, all depends on. It is not again one size fits kind of an all kind of an advice, but that is a better version of grains, right? I mean, the whole grains, hand pounded, unrefined, unpolished, those kinds of things are amazing. So I think these 3 4 things I would basically, that comes to my.
Was you were talking about some food misconceptions. One was fructose, and the other was on wheat and atta. So
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think uh, we have covered 1 hour today. So
Yeah.
if you would like, we can schedule another space some other Sunday, and
Not a
then we
problem.
can continue this conversation, which has been so interesting about your journey and all the insights we have shared so far. So we would love to have you for another session sometime. We'll plan it out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I want to thank you, Yogesh, for sharing these incredible insights on the Healthy X Sundays podcast. We are going to share the recording of this It'll be available on X as well as on YouTube. And so, everyone, please follow Eat Right Monk on social media and contact him to learn more about his lifestyle reset programs if you're interested in kickstarting your health journey.
Sure.
So,
Hey, thanks, Kunal. Thanks, Dev. Thanks for the invite, and it was lovely talking to both of you. Hope to see you later,
yeah,
sometime
yeah,
later. Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much, Yogesh.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great day.
You
Thanks.
too.
Bye. Bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye.